It says we're starting and we're live. Thank you for tuning in to the True Progress Podcast. My name is David and I'm joined here with Mr. Rousey and Mr. Parker. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty well.
Doing good.
Yeah, just good, just well. Not fantastic. Why aren't you feeling fantastic today?
Because I lost an hour of sleep.
Oh yeah, that's
a good answer, right?
Yeah, I woke up at 10 this morning, really confused. But then I saw my microwave said 9.
I know that I was a little sad when I saw my oven timer, the oven clock. It said it's 12 right now. Like, I want it to be 12 right now.
Yeah, like daylight savings time is such like a weird forced thing that we do. Should we ban it? Isn't it like in Arizona and Nevada, don't they, like one of those states, don't they like haven't they banned daylight savings time?
I don't know.
I think there's a few that have. I'm not quite sure which ones though.
Like what would be the benefits of banning it? Like besides
I think depression and like and car accidents and suicide rates actually like go up when the time changes.
I know car accidents increase.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that suicide rates do too.
We change our clocks. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that like just like an hour off of our like normal circadian rhythm is enough to cause such a severe like mental health deficiency.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's probably obviously for most people isn't horrible, but for some people it's probably like the last straw for them,
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. It's like, fuck, I lost an hour of sleep. That's it.
Yeah, I woke up late, lost my job, and I'm already suicidal because it made me late, So.
Yeah, something small like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah, it really is a butterfly effect.
Deterministic, even, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the original intent of daylight savings was to give, to give farmers more daylight, I think.
Mm-hmm.
More.
Makes sense.
Well, I heard that. I've also heard that it's for like, so it's daylight when like kids walk to school or something like that. I mean that's another argument for having daylight early.
There are a lot of incidental benefits of it.
Yeah, well, like daylight savings time wouldn't be a thing if we didn't have railroads and we were so like largely interconnected with such a big state, having to set different time zones and having to coordinate all of that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, but when it's done, it's done.
But it is nice that we do get some extra hours of sunlight in the day. I mean,
yeah, at this point, the sunset it basically like pushes forward the sunset. So now we're gonna have daylight up until I think before the most recent change, we would have daylight up until I think like 5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah.
And
that's gonna be like 6 or 7.
Yeah, now it will be yeah. So that's nice. I like having a good amount of daylight into the later evening. Honestly, makes it feel like the day is longer.
When is the sunrise now? Sunrise and sunset. When was the sunrise before? I usually wake up after that time anyway. So, today it's 7:30. 7:30 sunrise, cool. And 7 o'clock sunset.
So I guess as opposed to being 6 and 6.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, enough of daylight savings. So you guys were not able to catch much of the Alex Jones, Joe Rogan podcast.
No, but I would like you to fill me in on some of the more important stuff that was discussed.
Yeah, I wish that I watched it.
Well, it was pretty amazing. Just to preface things, what are your guys' general opinion on Alex Jones and why? I'm curious.
David, do you want to take this one?
Well, I would say like my opinion is probably misinformed because all I know of him is like just the hilarious bits that are taken out of context, like turning the water's turning the frogs gay and all of that, so I know him more of a meme than I know him.
Oh, he's totally a
else.
meme. Yeah, he's totally a meme.
Oh, he's
and I don't know, like he just seems. I don't think I just don't think he's someone that you should take seriously. Like it doesn't seem like that, you know. It just seems more of an entertainer. I know that he's like kind of advertised as like a conservative like commentator, but I don't know. He's just more of an entertainer than anything.
Yeah, well, so a few things that I have learned that since the podcast that I didn't really know before, but back in the Bush administration. Well, first of all, he has like millions, you know, of viewers for like all the time. He's got a massive following, which I just find interesting, you know. And secondly, during the Bush administration, because he's been a public figure. He's had his show for like decades, you know.
Yeah.
And back then he was very anti-Bush, and he was very like, I think he got big from one of like a very controversial question that he asked to President Bush, if I remember correctly. And so it's not like he's just like this, you know, Republican partisan. And he was kind of saying on the podcast how, you know, he's not really a Republican. He's just, that's kind of like the side that's, you know, I guess his followers are mostly Republican nowadays. So,
yeah, he's an anti-authoritarian.
well, I think that's mostly what it is. But I also I'm still not convinced that he's actually serious. You know, I personally think he is just playing a character, and he's not actually him. You know, I think that when the cameras turn off, he probably is just a normal dude. And he just plays this crazy guy because he makes millions of dollars doing it.
Well, some of those conspiracies are like dangerous, like the one where he denies like the Sandy Hook shooting, like that happened.
Well,
yeah, like
it's interesting because they spent like an hour talking about that on the podcast, and he basically was saying, you know, he was saying if you go back, he was just reporting what other, like, his followers basically. Obviously they're more inclined than others to latch on to conspiracies. So his followers were like sending him all this stuff from that they thought that Sandy Hook was like orchestrated or something like that. And so he said, I didn't go and personally obviously like watch the show at the time or anything like that. But his side of the story is basically that he was just sharing these reports that his followers were sending him, and he made no comment one way or the other. And he just said like he wouldn't be surprised if it was, because there's been times in the past where things have been orchestrated by governments. But he didn't. But and then like later on, he said that he came out and said no, it definitely happened. And he said like dozens of times during the podcast, he's all, I say it happened, you know, in his crazy voice. He's all, you know, no, it definitely happened. I say it happened. You know, these journalists are just crazy, and they don't report on that part, you know. But
he's a 9/11 conspiracy theorist as well.
So yeah, that is one thing, which actually, I don't know. There's basically everyone on that podcast, including Rogan's producer, was like, well, if there's any conspiracy that I'm kind of sympathetic to, it's that one, which is a whole nother conversation. But during Jones's during his divorce proceedings, when they were fighting over custody of his child or children or whatever, his defense, his legal defense, was that you can't look at the character Alex Jones. You have to look at me, because that's just a character. That's not who I am. I play that on TV. It's
Oh,
a
wow.
character that I play. So that's what his legal defense was, as far as why you can't, like, factor in that, because he's basically just acting that character. And I've
Yeah.
heard from people who have been interviewed, who have, like, been on his show or whatever. I think it might have been Milo, it might have been someone else who's been on there. He was basically saying he was really surprised because he seemed normal, and then the cameras and lights turned on, and then he just went crazy, It's like,
Yeah.
what the heck? So so yeah, I personally lean towards the idea that it's just a character he plays and he's not. But yeah, you are correct that there are ramifications to certain things. But there's ramifications to anyone who kind of goes and spreads these because there's, I mean, it's not like false reporting is exclusive to Alex Jones. They're every newspaper, anyone who publishes anything has falsely reported something at one point or the other, and
That's
so
true.
yeah, but knowingly, lying about something is another thing, and I'm not too sure that.
Certainly.
But anyways, I'm just rambling about that now. But yeah, anyways, you guys really got to watch it. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, I want to watch it.
It makes sense that it's a character he plays. That explanation of it, I think, is good.
And if you look at him with that mindset, then you can just laugh, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I like to think that most of his followers are probably the same, but then again, the comment sections of that podcast was filled with people going, "Oh, he's got a point." Like, like people need to listen to him more, and it's like, okay.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
he makes a ton of money off of his, like, merchandise that he sells too. Have you heard about that? He has
like his male enhancement products that he sells.
Yeah,
well,
super
that's
male
part of
vitality.
it. Yeah, that's part of it.
just look at him. Like,
Super male vitality.
He'll like rip his shirt off like when he sells the. Yeah, it's really funny.
Oh my god.
He's so hilarious. He's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in this interview, I when he starts talking about human-animal hybrids and other dimensions and aliens and 9/11 conspiracy, I mean, really, no, when like you said, when you think of him as a character, it really comes to light.
Yeah, but I mean, he, like I said, also that he's got a way to take something that happened, because like he took a New York Times article from 20 years ago about how China is experimenting with, like, basically splicing animal genes into human embryos and seeing what happens, and of course journalists are going to, science journalists are going to say those are human animal chimeras and everything, and so, like, he has a way of taking that and then saying that they're like, they've got in hiding now, since it's decades later, these like super weapons, that are like going to be unleashed on the world, that are like half bear, half human,
Yeah, one thing that I would add, this is a question I'd pose to you, Parker, with the whole human-animal hybrid embryos. Did they have rights?
Oh, well, that's why they terminate them after a few days. I mean,
Yeah.
there's actually, so you can't, in developmental genetics, you can't really study things very far along, because then it gets it gets really, really dicey when you have a human embryo in a petri dish, and then so I think it's like 10 days or something like that is the limit, as far as how much you can let something develop before you have to terminate it, because you don't want any of the actual things to start to develop that would be
noted as being human.
Exactly. So you just want to avoid that altogether. But do they have rights? I don't know. That's really sticky.
Yes.
I mean,
literally sticky, but
I would say, well, it's pretty. It's pretty similar to the discussion about, which I'm really interested in, of artificial intelligence. If we ever get anything that can learn on like, well, that not okay. Let me find the right way to say this. If we ever develop an artificial intelligence with a intelligence general enough to adapt to things similarly to an animal or a human or anything like that? Does it have rights? You know?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, actually, yesterday. It's weird that you bring it up.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well,
Can a machine?
I mean, I question the utility of machines even having sentience in the first place. Honestly, it's like
That
why?
true. Yeah.
You know,
What? Yeah.
of what use is
Why?
sentience?
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, I mean, honestly, all they need is like basic motor function and computational power and like some like task oriented ability. But beyond that, they don't need. They could just be automatons. They don't need to be actual like conscious organisms. You know.
So there's two things that why I could see that it would happen. So the first one is that it would it's instead it's not for any necessarily practical purpose, but instead you want to try and develop a machine that has a consciousness to better understand our own. And because if you can make
Yeah,
it, then you can then you know what the ingredients are, you know, and then we can
exactly.
understand our own consciousness. So
I agree with that. Yeah.
that's one way that I could see that trying to be developed in like academic circles or something like that. The second one is that it's just an unintended consequence of giving these things so much computational power and the
Yeah.
right algorithm to be able to learn
Yeah.
things is that it emerges from that
Yes.
potentially.
The whole.
So
Yeah, like you were talking, you've talked to me before about how like you give an AI the desire to learn, and it will I guess seek out the patterns and then problem solve on its own because it for a lack of a better term wants to, right?
What I immediately think of, because I'm kind of paranoid, is that, you know, I think of what was it in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Hal.
I can't do that. I can't do that, Dave.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, what
It's
what do
such
you
a
think?
terrifying scene, like on so many levels.
Well, what's interesting about that scene is that the Hal has way more human emotion than the actual human characters do, and it would be interesting to see if we ever come to a place where it's like we lose our own humanity, but we're replaced by what we create, like these androids, this artificial intelligence.
yeah, I mean if they're more powerful than us,
Yeah.
what if they look down on us and think of us as animals and that they're now
Yeah.
the the
It's
yeah.
like what we did to the Neanderthals, what humans did to the
Well,
Neanderthals.
I think there's not much known necessarily about what
Yeah.
happened to them because
Yeah, you're right.
they they we do have so the average amount of Neanderthal DNA in humans is it's like under 10%, but it is a lot. Like there was a lot of crossbreeding and everything, and there is some evidence to just suggest that they live together as well. So I'm not too sure why they died out, and I don't think anyone knows
Yeah,
necessarily.
I kind of just took that from Westworld, honestly.
Yeah, there's like several theories, and they're probably all right to some extent. Like just
Yeah,
interbreeding
yeah,
with them, and then like going to war with them. And I also think I might be wrong, but I also think that the Neanderthals were only they were best suited for like a colder environment, so they weren't as adaptable as humans are with our they were
With our naked flesh.
yeah, and like we Homo sapiens are like pretty slender in our build, whereas and like taller, whereas Neanderthals were like robust and like kind of more like dwarves actually, like kind of like built like barrels, like they were barrel chested and like all of that. So maybe maybe that just build wasn't as
I wish I could
useful.
I wish I could look at a human being like without the brain, like the structures in my brain which cause me to view a human being as familiar, so that I could see what human beings look like to other animals, like to dogs or, I mean, like it's kind of interesting to think about, what we would look like from another perspective, since we're so wired to view each other in I guess in sort of an automatic way, like with facial recognition.
Yeah, we always have that bias. We
So,
find faces and everything.
Yeah. But yeah, the slenderness of our overall like body type, the lack of hair, the eyes, Jesus, our faces are just kind of, I mean, we're not, there's nothing quite like us on, there's nothing else quite like us on Earth other than like monkeys, which have similar faces, but you know, none with sort of the multicolored patina of the irises and just the hairlessness and the height and the like opposable thumbs and hands, you know, which at one time were just feet. You know, it's like we're really weird creatures. The bipedal, like the bipedal element of what we are is like really weird. It's not very common on Earth.
I am really interested in how exactly, because I mean, basically, apes that moved to the plains of Africa is how we then developed, right?
Our height, yeah,
Our standing upright,
bipedal, yeah,
because we didn't have any trees to climb. We instead just had to walk long distances, and you can save a lot of energy being on 2 feet doing that.
yeah,
But there's a curve in the spine that had to evolve for that to happen, you know, because we need the curve in our lower spine to be able to balance this way.
yeah,
And I'm really interested in how in the world the in between stages of that
Yeah.
like happened, and how in the world it could have evolved, because it's like surely a midway point between curved and like not curved isn't too beneficial, you know. It's like that doesn't really, then you're just off balance even more. And so I'm really interested in how such a drastic thing could have evolved, you know. And there's a lot of things like that.
yeah,
There's like a you know there's plenty of cons with being bipedal too. One of which is that it makes giving birth to children much more difficult. Like
And we're
because
slower.
we're
Yeah.
slower. But being bipedal allows us to have a better survey of our environment. You know, we're taller, so we can detect predators a lot better. And it also is more energy efficient than using forelimbs to
Yeah,
run
much
that
more
way.
energy efficient, which is why we're also the well, I don't know if I don't want to say anything too drastic, but we're at least I think the mammal that can run the farthest.
Yeah, the longest distance without
Yeah,
tiring.
which is
Um,
how people would hunt in the past. They would just they would just run for a few days and then catch up to the deer that is now just so tired and dead that it can't run anymore.
but we know for sure that bipedalism predates our large brains and like our large frontal cortex, because in part that energy efficiency is what helped us develop such a big mass of brain. So it's probably one of the first things that we evolved in our in our history.
Well, there's a few theories on the brain thing, because so originally a few decades ago it was thought that our I'm trying to remember this correctly. So it was theorized that the change in our diet,
Eating meat.
yes,
yeah, well, it was basically that we
Cooked meat, and that's what.
the increased metabolism that our brain required caused a shift in our the other organs of our body to have to take in less energy or something like that. And so our stomachs shrank, and like all of our other organs kind of reduced in efficiency, or size or whatever, you know, then to allow, and because of the brain. But then there's more recent studies that have shown that not to be the case, and that our diets are fully able to support, you know, the functions of both basically. And that so I'm trying to remember this again, because it was part of that.
yeah. The one of the things that like apparently cooking, the use of fire and the for one thing, but also just the preparation of our dietary nutrients had a role in the, I guess, the reduction of our brains, the brain mass. But I don't know how. I can't say exactly how they're tied.
I know that cooking somehow, I'm not sure how this works, because I'm not a chemist, but cooking somehow increases like the caloric and like the nutrient density of like the meat that you're eating, and so
I'm not sure that that's the case, because the effect that cooking has, I mean, it's the same molecule. You're not adding any molecules either way,
Right.
And so you know, if we can break it down one way or the other, it's going to be broken down. But because what does happen is basically the proteins inside are denatured by the heat, and then that just either, in the case of like eggs or something like that, that will harden them because they change in shape. But there's still the same amount there. I think that the benefit of cooking was that it kills things that are bad.
Okay, I'm looking it up now, and it says that it increases the amount of digestible calories from what you're eating. So less of it would be like fibrous, and more of it would actually be something you can absorb.
Right. But in the case of meat, there's no fibrous material in meat.
So maybe like this element of cooking is only related to like if you're cooking potatoes or any other starchy or like vegetables such as that.
Yeah.
But in the case of meat, it kills the parasites, it kills all the stuff that could be in there that was in the other organism, and then so it really helps us not die sooner.
Yeah.
So we can have like so far we have kind of a little map of like, okay, we evolved to be bipedal. We could spot prey. We probably were herbivores for a while, and then somehow we began to we just decided to hunt for some reason.
Yeah.
How did that start?
Very, very interesting. I'm just wondering about the expansion of the cortex and what caused that, specifically. I mean, it wasn't that it wasn't that our cranial, I guess, like cranial structure size, did that accompany, or did it precede changes in brain mass, or was there no change there, and it was just simply an increase in the mass of the brain?
There was changes in the size of the cranium, like throughout, like if you look at the skull and it's been a long time since I've taken anthropology, but if you look at the skull of like an Australopithecine versus the skull of like Homo habilis, like the skull size is massively different. With I think our frontal lobe only developed within the last I don't even know like the number, but let's say like
it's a recent development.
It was a recent development. It was the most recent development was our frontal lobe. But amazingly, we still were able to use tools and live within a society together before those development, like before that development reached its full potential. So,
well, I mean, animals make herds, birds use tools. I mean, these behaviors are seen across the animal kingdom for sure. But actually, brain size is not necessarily, that's not, so because the best like estimator of intelligence would be not just alone brain mass, but it's brain mass to body mass ratio, which I forget what that's called. But that's basically the best estimator. But it's actually not like, that's kind of just a correlative of that. It's not actually but it's not the actual cause. So a paper that I read that came out a couple of years ago, I think, was able to find, it basically just analyzed a bunch of stuff from neuroscience and everything, and found that the best predictors of intelligence was so two factors: density of like whatever the density of neurons essentially, and then also the space between the neurons. If they're like if you have a lot but they're short and they don't really, and they're kind of far apart, you don't have the best. It takes a lot bigger signal, to kind of propagate things. But if they're really close together, you don't need as much to propagate things. And
so it's basically the dendrites, not the number of neurons.
Yeah, so it's basically the connectiveness, of the brain.
Yeah. So how well branched your dendrites are, and
Which if you have a big brain for your body mass, that also is likely then, right, for you to have a pretty dense brain because your body has put a lot of resources into it, but it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, our brains burn like a lot of calories. It's a big
Oh, there's a
investment.
huge cost. Yeah, there's a huge, and there's been many organisms that have evolved out of a brain and out of a nervous system. And like, I mean, when you look at the animal kingdom in general, so not including lots of different marine, life and all that kind of stuff. If you just look at the animal kingdom, there are all types of nervous systems present. So even though all animals came from some type of common ancestor that either had a nervous system or didn't have a nervous system, it's still debated on what type of nervous system it had. How could all of these different things evolve from one? How when did things either lose or gain nervous systems? And so it's thought that basically there's been tons of different separate individual cases where nervous systems are independently evolved and then independently lost, just because it just tends to, it's a big cost, but it's also a big reward depending on the environment that you're in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Evolution is such an amazing theory. It's just it can be hard to like wrap your brain around the whole idea,
I mean, I don't see it. We can't obviously verify it. I mean, we can verify it. It's correct. It must be. It's the only way that.
But I can understand when people just dismiss it because it just seems impossible,
But I mean, that's the thing, and the only thing that really justifies it really is the time element.
Yeah, right.
So much fucking time that.
And
I mean, the Earth is billions of years old. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's around 5 billion years old. I mean, Jesus, we can't even, I mean, wrap our heads around that. The sheer.
Yeah, the first signs of some type of proto life is like 2 billion years ago, I think. And that existed for a billion years before there was any type of multicellular life. So it's it took a whole billion years which is just an unfathomable amount of time. You can't even, and especially the reproductive the generation times of these single-celled organisms are tiny. So it's like, how many generations did these organisms go through to eventually get and it's theorized that RNA was actually the first genetic material, and then eventually that changed into DNA somehow. And it's like all these, but there's, again, like you say, there's all these somehows, right, that people can just easily dismiss it. But it's like, no, it's not that we don't know how it happened. We know it happened. We just don't we don't
have the links.
There's no way to find out how, but without trying to reproduce it. And you can't run an experiment over a billion years,
Yeah, and with what we've discovered about epigenetics, it's just that only makes the theory of evolution only more plausible. I mean, I think that actually, if people understand what epigenetics is, it almost settles the whole evolution debate.
Because behavior it explains how behaviors can be passed down from generation to generation, not just
also explains how the environmental pressures can change genes.
Yeah, and how our genetics adapt.
Explain to me how because we didn't cover. I don't remember us covering epigenetics very much, or if we did,
No, we didn't. And I remember.
Well, I mean, in my classes at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a relatively new field. It's like 20 years old now. That's a pretty new.
Yeah, but I thought it would have been covered in my evolution class, but I don't remember, or at least in my genetics class. It probably was. I just probably forgot it. But explain to me what exactly is the mechanism behind it passing of behaviors?
So basically, DNA is wrapped around. Tightly wrapped around.
I understand that a loosening of the bonds to the histones or a replacement of the histones can increase or decrease genetic expression, but I don't know how that's passed on.
I don't know exactly how
My
it's
personal view, my
passed on
personal,
either.
yeah, as far as behaviors go, I think that I'm not really, I don't hold the view that all, like that somehow the minds of other life forms on Earth, of other, other like creatures within the animal kingdom, I think that I don't know if I subscribe to the view that like behaviors are necessarily instinctual and genetic, and but I mean that's I don't know.
It just seems, and I don't know exactly how this works, but
What
it
makes
just seems
humans
to be that if your parent has a genetic mark for this that they developed in reaction to their environment. So here's an example. I just read a paper that was talking about how they've shown uh, addiction to THC in rats can lead to their next generation being more susceptible to being addicted to opioids. Now, I don't know exactly how that works, and it really opens up the door to just generational addiction to drugs and like
Yeah,
alcoholism,
that's really
and
interesting.
yeah.
But I don't. It basically, I think the way to think of it is like, your DNA is very the way that it's expressed is very flexible, and it's like the way that the DNA is wound around the histone. It's like a shape, and that shape can be like passed on. And that's like it's like oversimplifying to the point where it's
Interesting.
wrong.
But it makes sense
But
for that.
but that's basically what it's
Planning it
what
that
it's
way.
like.
I don't see how it can be passed on. That doesn't make any sense because like if you change and genes are expressed in each cell, especially each cell type completely differently. That's what makes them different cell types, that's what makes them differentiate. And so, if you're saying that the same result in your skin cells can have in your sex cells that are in a completely different part of your body, I don't see how that
Okay, I kind of
How
have a
the
I kind of
integration.
have a visualization. It's not that they keep their shape. It's that they will react to the same environment or a similar environment more rapidly. So, like, have you ever seen like the memory metal that like you bend it into a shape, and then like you put it into like hot water or something, and then it like
yeah.
will retain its shape. So it's basically like that. It's like it the DNA retains the memory of its shape, and so when it comes to when the environment when the next generation is exposed to a similar environmental factor, like that same memory becomes expressed kind of like that memory metal. It just forms back into the shape of like the parent before it. If that makes it more
Hmm.
if that
That
makes
is
a little
very
bit more
intuitive.
sense.
That's very intuitive.
I can't believe anything until I know how.
Yeah, I know. And
I,
again, this is like a new field, and
the visual is interesting.
yeah.
Yeah,
What I think about,
but you got to remember, it's not the same DNA, like it's not. You have billions of different or trillions or whatever, different copies, and it's like it when it copies itself, it all unwinds from the histones. Like it has to unshape itself all the time whenever a cell divides, and especially when you undergo. And then who knows what effect the crossing over happens in your when you're developing your gametes and all that kind of stuff. And so it's like I just don't. I don't know. The only way I can kind of understand maybe is potentially um, if there are hormonal changes in a mom that changes some type of makeup of the cytoplasm, like what's in the cytoplasm of cells or something like that, because um, the so you basically get the bulk of your cytoplasmic material and your mitochondrial DNA and stuff from your mom because it's the egg, and then the sperm is just has the DNA basically. There's really nothing else in the sperm, um, and so all your other extra stuff is you get from your mom. So I'm interested if maybe my first thought is, okay, is this effect of epigenetics and passing of behaviors more pronounced when it comes from the mom or when it comes from the dad? I'm really
That's
interested.
a good question. That's a good question. All of the studies that I had seen were all dealing with mothers and their daughters.
Okay, well, maybe that's
well, and those specific studies were about like the passing of estrogen and estrogen's effect on maternal behavior. So basically in those studies, they showed that it doesn't really matter if you were born to a mother who wasn't caring. If you're raised by a mother who's caring, you'll have the same amount of estrogen as the mother the mother that you were raised with, not the mother you're born with. Which is kind of another interesting.
That makes sense.
Just kind of, it kind of just goes to show like your adaptability to your genetic adaptability to new parents.
An environmental figure.
Yeah. I can't stand how people who just there when there's two different sides to like whether or not something is rooted in biology, it's always, oh, it's rooted in biology, so it's like it's set in stone essentially, or like because but it's done by if you are for that idea or against that idea with a specific issue. Some people will say, don't say it's rooted in biology because that means then it's set in stone. It's like, no, it doesn't. That's ridiculous. And then also people will say, oh yeah, say that it's, rooted in biology because then that shows that it's set. It's like, no. Everyone's wrong. Like that.
Yeah.
Nothing
Epigenetics blows all that out of the water.
Well, it just like any type of genetics blows that out of the water because your genetics are a blueprint, but it's not at all the construction of anything. It's not. It doesn't. There's so many other steps, apart from that. And so many places think things can go wrong.
And there's still so much to learn. For right now, like only 2% of our DNA actually does anything to our knowledge. 98% of it's just noise, and that's another like what the hell is the rest of this for?
Yeah, which was why evolution is a slow process.
It's completely imperfect.
Well, and I remember.
And then
I don't know. It's a pet peeve of mine where when people say, oh, evolution is not that it doesn't have all the answers and it doesn't it's not, it can't explain this and that. It's like, okay, give us
an example of there's obvious.
I was going to say, give us 1,000 years and we'll probably be able to, explain it. Like
exactly.
This is extremely new stuff and new knowledge, right?
It really is. The Industrial Revolution was only 200 years ago, and then with the Age of Reason began, and I think it was like the 1600s.
We've only had like half a millennia to figure all this out so far.
Yeah, and it's an incredible thing that we've gotten this far.
But if we just talk about the theory of evolution in general, Darwin is not that long ago.
No, the 1800s.
Not long ago at all. And it didn't even his whole. It wasn't, his book wasn't published for a long time either, and then it was. It wasn't big for a long time, and it definitely wasn't mainstream. Plenty of people were completely against the idea,
Yeah.
Just because he dared to lump humans in with other animals.
Yeah, and that was the central point of controversy, interestingly enough. But when we were talking about earlier briefly the problem-solving powers of different members of the animal kingdom, and if there's like, holy shit, if you look at like the problem-solving powers of and we're talking of of some bird species, it really is incredible. But the question that arises, for whatever reason, and I wish it wouldn't even be asked because there's not really a good foundation for it anyway, other than precedent, other than thinking that other than just thinking that it is this way because history says it's been this way. So that's the position we should take because it's grounded in history. That's dumb. And I think a lot of what makes human intelligence seem so superior is the fact that we have language. You know,
Yeah, language is
we
big
have very,
thing.
very sophisticated linguistic systems, I guess, for describing the world around us. And honestly, I think the effect of most, I think like language is a good channel through which you can learn, but at the same time, people, I think there's this illusion that words are actual things, and things may be much simpler than the specificity of our language implies. Because
Yeah, like
we're applying a word to, I mean, the building blocks of an idea or a concept or reality or whatever. And ultimately, I just think that it is useful because we need to have sort of a way of communicating with each other, and transferring knowledge between heads, I guess. But
language is limited.
yeah, and I think that's what makes like our consciousness and our human intelligence seem so superior to other members of the animal kingdom, which can't talk, which don't have language like ours. They can make noises to each other and communicate that way, or excrete pheromones and influence each other and communicate that way.
They can't
Um,
communicate abstract ideas to each other, though.
but they may have concepts, right? They may have I mean, I think there's no way to verify this, but it's certainly possible that that at least some animals have, I guess, a basic understanding of like, I mean, and I'm talking about basic things like physics, like, you know, you remove the hand from under the ball falls to the ball's not going to float in midair, it's going to fall to the ground, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
they may have
ants.
something like a set of expectations about physics, but how far that goes into
I believe that
completely.
ants have some way of counting because if you put, so they don't actually go back to their home by like a trail of pheromones or whatever, like was before thought. Because these researchers put little stilts on ants and see what would happen, and they completely overshot where they wanted to go back to. So basically, they count their steps to get back home. And
That's incredible.
if you have stilts on and you take bigger steps, then they just overshoot it by a large margin.
Yeah,
So
why would an ant even have a memory of, I mean,
I know. How would
they
you
have
gonna?
no
Yeah,
they
that's
have no
weird.
I mean, how do they orient themselves even if they know the number of steps in the right direction? They have to have um I mean, who knows, maybe they're just like environmental cues. I don't know if they have I don't know what their sense capacities are. I know that
I believe they use different. I could be wrong, but I think they also use different. Well, I know bees do this for sure. They recognize. They pick out certain. What is the word I'm looking for? Like landmarks. Yeah, they do
yeah,
pick out
landmarks, there you
certain
go.
landmarks. And so like if you move these landmarks that before was like where they wanted to go, they'll go over there, and it's like, so they recognize those things as well, and so possibly ants do too to get back.
I read an
Oh yeah, that
article.
was that rock. I remember that. So
I
100
don't know.
steps to that other rock.
Yeah. And I've watched the video of the crow making a hook and bending a wire, and I'm I don't know where to stand.
Crows
Um,
are amazing.
Amazingly intelligent. They have
So great.
facial recognition.
I know they recognize human faces. Like we
they
can't even
remember.
recognize crow faces.
They
What the
have
heck? And they have a way to communicate like who someone is to the other crows. Because
and
if
then
a crow doesn't like you, he'll convince everyone else not to like you as well,
yeah,
which
and
is just how.
birds would be, when we were talking about earlier body mass to brain mass, birds necessarily have to be light because why? Because they fly. Their wings, they have to be able to propel themselves off the ground and into the air and stay in the air, whatever, all that jazz. But so their bodies necessarily have to be, I mean, their bones are from my own reading, I know that, and this is not true for birds that are sort of stuck to the ground or can only fly a couple of feet above the ground. But birds that can that migrate, that that do fly at great heights and long distances have very thin and very easily breakable bones.
Birds are great. They even change if they're flying long distances or they need to preserve energy or whatever, they'll change from being warm-blooded to cold-blooded.
What?
Yeah, they have because they're obviously evolved from dinosaurs or some part of dinosaurs which were warm-blooded, but they came from reptiles. Well, I don't know. It's actually debated whether or not dinosaurs were warm or cold-blooded. It's thought that they're kind of the same as birds, where they're both basically. Yeah, they can kind of go between.
What are humans?
We're warm-blooded.
Okay.
All mammals are warm-blooded, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that we have an internal heating system. Is that what that means?
Yeah. So like the perk of being warm-blooded is that
we never withstand lower temperatures because our body.
Yeah, and like we can withstand any environment. The con though is that we have to continually eat food. We have to continually consume energy. Whereas cold-blooded animals, they don't have to eat as much. But
interesting.
They're reliant on their environment to be heated up. But yeah, I didn't know that about birds, that they can switch. That's cool.
Yeah.
I forget what the term is called.
I read an article lately that was talking about how bees not only can count, but they can add too.
Well, I mean, counting is adding, is it not?
Yeah, it's just adding one.
True. It's just adding by one. I think they can add more than just one, though.
yeah.
But like, how do insect colonies like that? How did they evolve? You know, how did like bees and ants evolve and termites evolve? Like these societies, you know, like where all of the bees are so genetically similar. They're all sisters, you know. And
well, I mean, yeah, that's across the animal kingdom. Members of the same species travel in packs, you know, and they herd.
Yeah, but the difference is that like a colony of bees, only one of the animals, only one of the bees in the colony in a colony is responsible for producing the offspring. There's only one.
Right, but for most species, it's a reproductive necessity to stay to group.
Right, but the other bees don't reproduce.
Only the queen bee reproduces, and the queen bee will produce drones that are basically just like flying gametes that reproduce with her again to produce more offspring. So it's like, what the hell's going on?
Wait, there's only one member of the hive that yields offspring. We just have one queen.
The queen bee, yeah. Same with ants.
There's only one female in it per hive.
No, there are other females, but there's only one.
Well, maybe that's why. Female. Maybe that's because of the need for population density. Because if there are multiple females, you can form smaller groups. But if you only have one female, then you have a lot of men that need to rely on that one female.
No, I thought that the queen was the only.
No. It's actually most of the hive is female. Only the drones, which are the gametes with wings.
Oh, I guess that would be kind of a.
And I call them gametes with wings because the whole purpose is to mate. They'll mate. They'll hook up with the queen bee in the air, and then their abdomen will explode.
Yeah, you're right. Each hive has one queen and 100.
They are drones.
There's 100 female worker bees for every male drone bee. So yeah, but that just shows all the worker bees are females that never reproduce. So why in the world would they? There's nothing in it for them, right? There's no reproductive advantage.
There's no reproductive advantage, but there is, I guess they're all like they're all from the same genetic origin, you know, like they're all descendants of the queen.
So can't one of the females like become the queen if it dies, or go off and split into another hive?
No.
How do you get a queen?
So a queen develops from a special diet they eat called I don't remember what it's made out of, but it's called royal jelly. Like the offspring will be raised on royal jelly that's infused with hormones that turn them into the queen bee that they are.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is, I guess, another example of how our environment impacts us.
Holy shit. This is a mind-expanding conversation.
Yeah, the way that sex is handled, that sexual reproduction is handled in mammals is just crazy. I mean, like alligators or whatever, their sex is determined by the temperature of the egg while they're developing, which is just weird to me. And there's lots of different organisms that can just change between whatever is required.
Yeah. How popular is asexual reproduction in nature?
Well,
I mean,
it's
I don't
bacteria, right?
I mean, there are multicellular things that can do it, but typically it's like marine life, like
invertebrates.
Yeah. I don't think there's any.
There might be some special cases. I think there are special cases of non-invertebrates that can. I know that there's some species of birds that have both male and female genitalia. I think there are zebra finches. Zebra finches are gynomorphs. They have half of their brain is male, half of their brain is female. I'm not really sure how that works breeding wise, but
there's great utility in that. I mean,
I don't know if that means that they can reproduce, like they're asexual though. I don't know if that's true.
Oh, that's interesting. So
they're not asexual.
So Komodo dragons. Let me see. Komodo dragons, sharks, birds such as chickens and turkeys, snakes such as pit vipers and boa constrictors have all seen instances of virgin births.
Huh.
Wow. Asexual reproduction is basically just mitosis on a large scale. Just multicellular mitosis.
Essentially. But yeah, but there's like so much more.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. Yeah, it's like mitosis into a, like new embryo, which is something completely different than.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could easily see how that could happen, where if you just take meiosis and you stop it halfway, then you've got it.
Yeah.
If you take, because I mean they come from these specific sex cells that undergo that type of division, so that they're undifferentiated and all this kind of stuff, that they can give rise to anything. But yeah, that's really interesting. But it's only so asexual reproduction in vertebrates have only been observed in captivity, which makes sense. So it's probably driven by some type of environmental
isolation.
Pressure,
reproductive isolation.
Yeah.
I wish I could reproduce by myself.
Of course.
Create another clone of me.
You could have sex with.
Well, if anyone could, it's probably females, because they have the other stuff required.
I would be utterly disgusted by another version of me. I would kill it. That's how much self-love I have.
Don't kill it. Donate it to me, and I'll take care of it.
You'd kill it. You'd overfeed it.
It would overfeed itself.
That's genuinely funny.
Gosh, we went on a tangent. I don't even remember where we.
Well, we started with Alex Jones.
Yeah, went through evolution, through epigenetics.
We could spend the rest of our podcast just cursing Jordan Peterson.
Oh, well, I know you would like that.
No, honestly, he's a mixed bag for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the good in the bag?
The good? The good is, the good is he's a good writer. He's a good writer, though. I mean, like he's a really good writer. He might even be on a level that I would consider like he's almost genius when it comes to writing. But I don't like his. This was described well in a video I recently watched on him. I don't like his like 1950s father routine that he does, where he's like, God, the millennials are so damn ungrateful, and the whole that whole narrative spiel. That's the moralism or the moralisticness of it. All that. That's kind of it's a little bit much for me, but I can see why people latch onto it.
Well, I think what's interesting about Peterson is just his cult following is probably the most interesting thing about him.
Following?
Yeah, because he does. I mean, I wouldn't say the majority of the people that watch Peterson are like fanatic about him, but there is kind of, it seems like a group that is willing to defend everything that Peterson does and follows him, as if he's like the next great prophet or something.
Yeah. I don't want to.
And that's like
spend the rest of the podcast cursing Jordan Peterson. He's not that bad.
Okay, so I guess we won't do that then.
Yeah. It would probably sink the rest of the discussion if we got onto that topic.
Well, we could just talk about him. We don't have to curse him.
I mean, I feel like we give him more power by talking about him.
No, I think he has plenty of power already.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that.
That's my point.
We will change that. No, well, why more power? So you think that his message is not one that should be spread?
I think there are parts of it that are useful for some people, but I don't think that it's like legendary. I don't think that it's spectacularly good, or I think it is a good message for a lot of people. Honestly, I mean, like.
Well, I mean, I think that if you want to look at the value of something, then you look at how quickly and how successful it's able to be spread. And it's his message is definitely one that has resonated with many people, and especially how much he's making now, and how many people are willing to keep contributing to him and make sure that he's able to.
Oh God, I regret even mentioning this, but yeah, you are right. I mean, I don't think that he's not a bad guy. I'm not like, I don't think that he's.
You just think he's overrated?
I think he's a little bit overrated, and sometimes he's what the public debate needs. I mean, he's very precise, and he's not his conservatism is at least backed up by some good I guess thought, but it's just he's not everyone's intellectual. I mean, he appeals to a very wide audience, but I don't know. I'm not particularly tickled by it, as most people are. And maybe he isn't even overrated. I mean, he obviously has a lot of talent for what he does. That's no one can deny that, really. Sometimes he kind of gets off the rails a bit, but that's very rarely he is like that. Most of the time, he's pretty.
I would say like the perks of Peterson are that he's generally pretty consistent with his message, and I mean, if you've watched any of his videos, you know what he's gonna say. Like he doesn't.
Yeah, he says the same thing many times.
Yeah. And so I think like you don't even need to read his book to get what he's about. Like just listen to his his interviews and all of that. And I think the most valuable videos of his are definitely his lecture videos. From when he was a professor, more than anything else, because
Yeah, I agree.
There just seems to be kind of a, he's best when he's left to just kind of rant without interruption. Because if he's in any sort of debate, he just gets too disagreeable for his own good. He just gets too
I agree. That's one of my criticisms of him.
He just gets too prickly.
Well, that's a criticism of himself. I mean, like he has said before that his greatest weakness is not being too disagreeable. He has trouble with that.
Yeah, he's as I pointed out to David last time we talked, he's not very Canadian.
No, yeah, he's not very Canadian.
He has the accent down pretty good, but
well, he was first a professor at Harvard, so
yeah,
for quite a while, I think like 10 years.
Yeah, I know that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who found him like 3 years ago when he was just talking about personality in his lectures, and and then and then he just slowly started getting more and more popular based on the Bill C-16 stuff that was going on and everything, and his opposition to it, and then that one interview where so what you're saying is that whole thing, that I think that was like the tipping point where he went from being known about like from a certain portion of the internet to like everyone knows who he is now, and then he just went wild with
Yeah,
popularity.
he gets trashed too at some of his speeches and his events.
Well,
People don't like him. I mean,
the protests
like,
are absolutely
what can you say about
ridiculous,
that?
though.
Yeah, what could you say about the Nazi presence at your last event? Like, yeah, I don't like Nazis.
Yeah, what do you want
Yeah, but I think that he enjoys sometimes. He enjoys, like with the Kathy. What is her name? Kathy Griffith or whatever. Newman. Kathy Griffith. I don't know who Kathy Griffith is.
It's hilarious to have Kathy Griffith and.
Oh yeah, Kathy. She's. I think that
Kathy Griffin is she's the one who held up Donald Trump's decapitated head.
Yeah,
she's the comedian.
She's the comedian.
Yeah, and she also is one that called for the doxing of all those Covington students.
Yeah, that was a slip of the tongue.
She's now being sued for. So
yeah, that was a bit of a slip of the tongue there, but yeah. But Kathy Newman, like she was like, so you're saying that women are not intelligent enough to be like one of her more ridiculous characterizations of what he said. She was totally off that entire interview. It was really laughable, but he almost enjoyed the kind of ruffling her feathers a little bit further. Like, when someone asks you, you don't believe that women are intelligent enough to be in a field, they ask you that question. You first of all, you don't laugh or smile or anything like that, because that's one, condescending to the person asking. It's also kind of a weird way to respond to the audience, because it's like, okay, that's, obviously his intent was that, yeah, no, I don't believe that it's true that there are really any dramatic gender differences between men and women for any given field. There's talent, among both genders, and yada yada yada. He could have just said something perfectly PC and effective like that, but instead he sort of beats around the bush a little bit, and he kind of, he's not evasive, but it was almost the way that it came across to me, and I don't think it was. This is just my own subjective take on it. Was that he was kind of toying with her a little bit, and he could have very effectively silenced that concern.
well, I think he did silence that concern pretty well when he basically said, when he pointed at when he basically turned it back on her and was like, what are you doing right now? You're doing what you should be doing. You should be trying to find the truth, and you're being disagreeable in this, right? And that we need to all be able to be disagreeable with each other and everything, and be able to offend each other, because you're offending me right now, as you should be. So
there were parts of it that were fine. I just thought that particular response could have been better, and I feel that way a lot with watching his lectures and stuff. Is he could just I don't know. They're just more effective ways that he could go about responding to certain concerns, even if they're stupid, even if the concerns are stupid and airheaded. You know,
Yeah.
Well,
a lot
I
of them
think
are. A lot of
when
them
you
are. But
when you've heard it like a billion times, it's kind of hard then to respond to it, you know,
yeah,
in
sure.
the same way as when you heard it the first time.
Yeah.
He doesn't like being put in a box, and he doesn't like having a label put on him, which is why he likes to pussyfoot around the question of like, do you believe in God? Like he doesn't answer that straightly because he doesn't want to be considered. He doesn't want to be labeled as a Christian.
Yeah, well, he wants to avoid the most like presumptions that you could make basically about him. He doesn't want to say
Yeah.
anything that would stereotype him a certain one way or the other. Which I mean, I think that's really just to the audience's benefit because you well, I don't know. At the same time, there are plenty of people that will stereotype you one way or the other, regardless of what you say.
Yeah, I think it'd be easier to list the things that he's not than to actually pinpoint what he is. You could say that he's not a fundamentalist. He's not a Republican or a Democrat. You know, he's not any of these.
He's Mr. Peterson.
He's he's his own. He's he's very idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to listen to his stuff, but it's just anyone who's obsessed with his message should always come back to like, okay, he's just a guy, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really watching anything that I see of him anymore, just because I feel like I've gotten the most that I can get from it. If I watch an interview or a video,
It's
like
usually
you
a
said
debate.
before, yeah, it's all things I've heard before. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not learning anything new. I've gotten all the knowledge that I can from you, and so until you start talking about other things, then I'm not gaining anything more from this. But you know, more power to you to keep telling other people, because I think it really did help me. You know, again, a few years ago, really realize that, you know, you gotta put in the work and you gotta step up to the plate, and things, you know, life isn't gonna hand you things, and you gotta go out there and you gotta sacrifice to really gain progress. And I think that that's just a fantastic message that really has been honestly lost from the like a religious nature of our culture now, that that message kind of got lost in with it. And I feel like he is the first person to really be able to bring that message to the forefront, not in a religious, in a secular way. Exactly. Yeah. So and that's why I think it's valuable.
And I'll give you credit, like you were the one, Parker, who introduced me to Peterson, and I think, well, there's a lot of factors that contributed to like my getting my shit together, but his videos were definitely helpful. You know, it was more of kind of like the cadence that I worked to. Yeah, I think those messages are the best. I think like his political stuff, you could take it or leave it, you know.
Yeah, oh, and especially his dietary advice.
Oh yeah.
LOL.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I just come from the personal bias of maybe being slightly overworked already. So when he tells me about, you know, I sacrifice and all that, I mean, you know, that's obviously true. More people need to internalize that value and act on it. You know, I mean, society would be a way better place, and we certainly wouldn't have as many stupid people if people internalize the right kinds of values, and that is one of the values that desperately needs internalizing. So on that level, I don't criticize him for that message, and I think that's one of the positives of Jordan Peterson. But I think that he's I don't know, the points in which I do criticize him are kind of what David articulated earlier, which he does kind of, you know, I pussyfoot around certain issues and questions, and I don't think I think that he doesn't serve himself well by being that way, by being too disagreeable. But then again, I mean, you know, he does it, as you say, he does admit to being disagreeable, so there's that.
And it's kind of hard not to pussyfoot around a question if you disagree with the question. Like if you think the premise behind the question is wrong, you know, and like,
He
or
should've-
or you think that they're asking the wrong question, then it's like,
yeah. So he should say exactly why it's wrong. And
well, but I think in doing so, he's also not answering the question, which is why a lot of people don't like that.
yeah,
You know, because people ask, "Oh, do you think God exists?" And he's like, "Okay, that." He's like, his answer is basically that's the wrong question. But yeah, many people interpret that as pussyfooting
yeah.
around the question.
Oh yes, no, they are the wrong questions. They're not the right questions to be asking, but you know, they're asked because people think that they're important.
I just, in general, I really hate the idea. I mean, this goes from everything from Trump to Peterson to you know, Shapiro, to anyone who's in the public eye. If you like them, you are then assumed to like everything they say and do,
Yes.
and anything in the past that they've ever said or done, you approve of. And it's like, what? How? That's such a myopic view of the world, you know? And it's just, I hate it. I hate that so much.
Well, that's just bound to happen. I mean, it just takes less energy to assume that than to like think, oh, you know, this person probably doesn't, you know, follow all of the, you know, he probably doesn't believe in like the carnivore diet too, you know? I mean, it's just easier to assume. It's just bound to happen. I mean,
It is easier, yeah.
it just takes so much energy. It's the
Damn
same
it,
reason.
Jacob. Damn it, Jacob. We were having a great conversation about animal intelligence and all these cool topics. You had to bring up Jordan Peterson.
I think this is fine. I think it's fine. But so do we want to keep going, or do we want to close up things here?
I'm down. I'm down to keep going, but it's up to it. It doesn't matter to me.
Jacob, what would you prefer us talk about? Was there anything on your mind?
I didn't come in with any topics today. Probably should have. But yeah, I mean, we can stop. I don't really have anything that I really want to discuss, particularly. I mean, I like discussing things in general, so whatever. If you guys have anything you want to discuss, then I could latch onto that. But yeah.
Well, we do need to think of a way to better, I think, spread this live stream to people, and this podcast. And I'm only saying this on air right now because if anyone is watching that cares to, and they have an idea, we would like to hear it.
Yeah, let's just for today, let's close, and then let's talk about after.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, let's talk about how this went.
Yeah.
So all of you 3 people who were watching, thank you so much, and we'll be back next week with another broadcast.
Yay.
Adios.
Adios.